In the last episode, we have shown that at the depths of Xi Jinping's mind, he believes in the divine and Buddha, fate, dragon chakra, prophecy, etc. On the other hand, the guiding ideology of the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP, is Marxism-Leninism. As the party leader, can Xi Jinping be free from such influence? Xi is a second-generation Red or offspring of the first-generation CCP revolutionaries. The Red Kingdom was built by Xi's father's generation. Now that Xi has taken it over, the Red Kingdom cannot change color in his hands. Therefore, he has a very strong conviction to preserve the CCP. July 1st, 2023 was the 102nd founding anniversary of the CCP. The magazine Chao Shi, the leading CCP theoretical journal and news magazine, published a speech from Xi in which Xi mentioned, "If the people we bring up no longer believe in Marxism, the tragedy of the dramatic changes in Eastern Europe, the collapse of the Soviet Communist Party and the disintegration of the USSR will occur." However, the CCP and Xi Jinping have already reached a stage where they are nearing the end. This is particularly evident after the demise of former Premier Li Keqiang. The cause of his demise has prompted all sorts of rumors and conspiracy theories. People are using it to express their frustration with Xi, while Xi faces a political and economic crisis that has no solution. He is likely to start a massive purge, which will purge China into even greater turmoil. On the morning of November 2nd, 2023, the CCP authorities held a funeral for Li Keqiang in Beijing. Xi Jinping and 7 other members of the Standing Committee attended, while Hu Jintao, Xi's predecessor, and the previous CCP leader sent a wreath to the funeral. The funeral was largely modeled on that of former Premier Li Peng, who passed away 4 years ago. What was different was that Xi's wife Peng Liyuan attended the funeral too. News footage showed Xi shaking hands with Li's widow with little expression on his face. Peng Liyuan meanwhile looked mournful and was about to burst into tears at one point. As the two bowed at the funeral, Xi kept an impassive expression while Peng made an almost 90-degree bow. Peng's appearance was a clear attempt by the Xi regime to emphasize the harmony between the two families and possibly to dispel rumors of infighting between Xi and Li. The problem is that Li died a suspicious death. He was considered the weakest premier in the CCP's history. He was in power for 10 years but was overshadowed by Xi. Retired only 7 months ago, he was the youngest among the retired Standing Committee members at only 68 years old. Like other high-ranking CCP members, he had the best healthcare services, but he died suddenly and unexpectedly. It is well known that Xi and Li were at odds in recent years. There have been speculations that the tension between them was directly or indirectly related to the internal struggle in the party. The reality is, many people are putting the blame on Xi Jinping, and conspiracy theories are prevalent. Now, all over China, many people inside and outside the system have come to the mourning of Li Keqiang spontaneously. It is a big shock to Xi Jinping.
因为就感觉就是好好的一个总理就说没就没了。
Because I feel like he's a good premier and suddenly he's gone.
就是感觉，痛心吧，那我就。
And I also feel sad for him because he was not yet old. I don't know what else to say.
剩下也不知道啥。
He made a great contribution to people's lives to the improvement of living standards. For the pandemic, the premier always rushed to the front line, so we remember the premier and wish for him to rest in peace.
希望总理一路走好。我觉得我们其实心情是。
I think we are grieved to lose a premier who was so good to us. I think it was very sudden.
我觉得，这个事情很突然。
感觉我们的前总理。
I feel that our former premier, Premier Li, was pretty down to earth and kept a low key. It is also obvious that he has done a lot for the welfare of the people's livelihood. He did a lot for our people. He is very humble and low-key. As a result, the happiness of ordinary people is also multiplying. On November 2nd, Li was cremated at Baobaoshan Revolutionary Cemetery, the main resting place for the highest-ranking CCP figures. As if facing an imminent threat, the government deployed a large number of police officers and black-clad men to control the area around the cemetery, as well as along Beijing's main street, the Chang'an Avenue, restricting the passage of vehicles and pedestrians. Here, a woman was escorted away by plainclothes policemen with their mouth covered as Li Keqiang's hearse passed by. Various kinds of strict stability measures have nonetheless reflected Xi's fear. To be fair, Li had no political achievements during his tenure. He and former party leader Hu Jintao belonged to the Tuan faction or the Communist League faction. They didn't belong to the second generation of the Reds. In the eyes of the CCP's Reds, they are considered to be managers working for the red-blooded elites. Under the training of the CCP culture, the Tuan faction is generally weak and timid. People who have some reformist illusions about the CCP continue to describe Li Keqiang as a liberal, which isn't true. But Li did speak some truths, such as 600 million Chinese people earn only RMB 1,000 per month. Reform and opening up will not stop, and the Yangtze and Yellow Rivers will never flow backward. It was in stark contrast to the forceful and Maoist-oriented Xi. Many people have a favorable impression of Li as a result.
中国是一个人口众多的发展中国家，我们人均年收入的平均水平是3万元人民币，但是有6亿人每个月的收入也就是1000元，1000元，在一个中等城市可能租房都困难。现在又碰到疫情，疫情后啊，可以说民生危要。怎么样保障那些困难的群众和经过疫情发生新的困难群众的基本民生，这应该是我们放在极为重要的位置上。
Li's passing has triggered a wave of public mourning in many parts of China. At his former residence in Anhui province, people came to pay their respects, creating a sea of flowers. The local government is on high alert, keeping a close watch on the scene. 10 years after Xi's rise to power, China's economy is now in a cliff-like downturn. The unemployment problem is no longer an undercurrent, but hits like an unprecedented wave. There is widespread frustration in and outside of the establishment, but given the tightly controlled social environment, people can only take advantage of Li's death to vent their anger. In other words, the kind of mourning expressed by people is more like venting how they feel about the present China than mourning for Li. Perhaps many are comparing themselves to Li, comparing their own repressed lives under the CCP regime to the almost humiliating life of Li as a weak premier. On Halloween night in Shanghai, a young man dressed as a road sign. What was on it said, "I am missing you in Shanghai." Others carried large wreaths on their backs with a small wreath with the word memorial in the center. They expressed their mourning for Li this way. Of course, the police asked them to stop this kind of behavioral art, and wreaths were confiscated.
太抽象了。
This was echoed overseas. On October 31st, at a Halloween event in Hollywood, Los Angeles, Chinese youths targeted Xi Jinping in a satirical manner. Whatever the truth behind Li's demise, Xi will find it difficult to clear himself of suspicion. Xi is already in an irreversible general environment. When Evergrande's owner Xu Jiayin filed for bankruptcy in the US, China's economic tower could already be heard making a collapsing noise and an oh-oh moment. Most of the CCP government's massive bureaucratic apparatus, its military spending, the cost of maintaining social stability by suppressing its people, and the huge amount of money it pours out overseas rely on its real estate economy. Now this industry is collapsing. The rest of the economy is also in an unprecedented depression. The fiscal crisis of the CCP regime is superb, one with no solution. Let's take a look at a few tiny pieces of present-day Chinese society. Starting from September 2023, on the streets of a provincial capital, photos of celebrities and advertising billboards were removed and replaced with photos of the so-called heroes and martyrs of the CCP. Some Chinese netizens have described these photos as zombie images. Here is a public protest for unknown reasons. Police were deployed for arrests and video recording was forbidden. Nobody was in the sleeping compartment on the train from Beijing to Guangzhou. No one. No one. No one. No one. No one, no one. What are people busy with? What's everyone up to? Here comes someone, here comes someone. It's the crew member, not the passenger. To be fair, when Xi took over the regime, China was already in a state of crisis, and various fatal mines had been planted, especially in the economy. The so-called reform and opening up is, in essence, a crony market economy for the CCP elite. The crony market economy uses state power as the axis, trading off power for money as the lubricant and taking greed without moral restraint as the incentive. It also enjoys a generally conducive international environment of alliance and collusion between the 10 million corrupt CCP officials and international capitals that channel benefits to each other. The end result is the exploitation of hundreds of millions of Chinese migrant workers for more than 20 years of slave-like labor. It has created an unprecedented polarization of power and wealth in China, and the disastrous utilization and destruction of resources and the natural environment of China. Such an economic model, which produced only transient economic benefits, offers no sustainability whatsoever. Although Xi's predecessor Hu Jintao had been the CCP leader in name for 10 years, he was only a puppet under the control of his predecessor, Jiang Zemin. Jiang gained the trust of Deng Xiaoping and climbed to the top of the CCP because of his firm support for the June 4th massacre in 1989. After Jiang became the boss of the CCP, he did several things that stunned the world. These include the persecution of Falun Gong starting on July 20th, 1999. At that time, it was said that as many as 100 million Chinese people were practicing Falun Gong, which centers on the universal values of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. From all walks of life, they were the mainstream population in China with spiritual and moral pursuits. The impact of this persecution is far-reaching. It has resulted in a debt of bloodshed for the Jiang faction, who are scared and unwilling to give up its power no matter what. It fears the consequences and retributions when the power is gone. Seemingly cooperating with this course of action, Jiang pursued the governing tactics of corruption. He promoted a large number of corrupt people at all levels, from the central to the local officials, from the party, the government, and the military personnel, to the state-owned enterprises and institutions. In particular, Zhang advanced those officials who were bold in persecuting and suppressing the Falun Gong practitioners, and who dared to take the blame for the large number of human lives lost. Zhang's public slogan was, "Make big money in silence." It means don't concern yourself with the affairs of the state and don't engage in spiritual and moral inquiries.
但是呢，问来问去的问题啊，都 too simple， 啊 ，sometimes naive， 懂了没有？
那这样就心里觉得。
我有这个必要好告诉你们一点人生的经验。中国有句话叫闷声大发财，我就什么话叫闷声大发财，这是最好的。
What is often overlooked by the public is that during the 30 years when Zhang was actually in power, he adopted the approach of the Ponzi scheme to the economy and developed China's real estate industry into the #1 industry in the universe. But the bubble will surely burst when there is no new taker for the baton. Xi may have seen the crisis, but he has chosen the wrong general direction. That is, he has tried to keep the CCP alive, to try to sustain it, prevent it from disintegrating. Thus, he dares not touch the fundamental problems and even tries to cover up the various sins and crimes of the CCP's top echelons. During his 11 years in power, Xi has made many enemies for himself in his effort to purge the Jiang faction and secure power. According to official figures, by July 18, 2023, in the 11 years of Xi's anti-corruption crackdown, more than 600 high-ranking officials at the vice-provincial ministerial level and above have been investigated and prosecuted, as well as many more at the middle level. Imagine the political, military, and business networks of family and friends behind these officials. It's huge and complex. They have all become Xi's enemies and the battle is fierce, all or nothing. Xi has also fallen prey to Zhang's backstabbing tactics, eliminating his best helpers as well as the moderate Communist Youth League officials. Worst of all, to save the party, Xi made compromises with the Jiang faction before the 19th and 20th CCP Congresses. As a result, not only Jiang Zemin and his partner Zhen Qinghong remained in the power circle, but also a few of Zhang's key officials stayed. At the 19th CCP Congress, Xi promoted Wang Huning, the chief think tank of the Jiang faction, to become a member of the Politburo Standing Committee, the highest decision-making body of the CCP. He was put in charge of ideology. Since taking office, Wang has been feeding Xi Marxist-Leninist ecstasy. On December 16, 2021, Hewitt, a prominent American media personality, published an article in the Washington Post stating that Wang Huning, one of the 7 members of the Politburo Standing Committee of the CCP, has extraordinary ideological influence over Xi Jinping, and accordingly argued that Wang Huning is the most dangerous man in the world. Under Wang Huning's instigation, in just 5 years, Xi turned a good hand into a terrible one. In the past 5 years, the anti-Xi forces at home and abroad have become increasingly fierce in criticizing Xi, opposing Xi, and calling for Xi to step down. At present, China's real crisis doesn't lie in the death of Li Keqiang. The incident will calm down after his body is cremated. We previously reported that China's Foreign Minister Qin Gang and Defense Minister Li Shangfu were purged. These 2 incidents have better reflected Xi's current political crisis. These senior officials being purged were personally promoted by Xi Jinping and were once his cronies. Similar incidents are likely to continue and even occur on a large scale. Why? It has to do with what we discussed in the last episode. That is Xi's belief in a 1,000-year-old Chinese prophecy that he would die by assassination. The biggest dilemma Xi faces now is that on the surface he is treated with extreme obedience, but in private such loyalty is non-existent. To protect his power and to stay alive, Xi needs to find out who the infiltrators or betrayers are. Here we'll briefly review the 2 prophecies from the previous episode. This is the actual dilemma of Xi. His thinking is a contradictory mixture. On the one hand, he believes in the divine and Buddha's destiny, dragon chakra, and prophecy deep down in his heart. On the other hand, he swears by the Marxist-Leninist way of thinking. The former is rooted in traditional Chinese culture, the latter is anti-traditional and anti-universal values. He believes in the divine and Buddha and atheism, which conflict with each other. This is probably one of the main reasons why Xi's path has become increasingly narrow, and why he is now in a critical and dangerous situation. A peculiar phenomena is that while many people from all walks of life, both at home and abroad, have been cursing Xi, labeling him as a fool and worthless, this very same man has been re-elected for a third term at the 20th CCP National Congress in October 2022. So, what is going on here? In our opinion, although Xi may not have realized it himself, he has done the job regardless. That is, his mission is to disintegrate the CCP.